The hum of my car engine was steady, but my mind raced with 1,000 conflicting thoughts. The small suitcase on the passenger seat seemed to weigh more than it should, filled not only with clothes but with the remnants of my past. Leaving my husband after 22 years of marriage wasn't something I had planned, but then again, neither was discovering his infidelity. I pulled into the parking lot of my son Ethan's apartment complex. My fingers hesitated on the steering wheel, reluctant to move. It wasn't the embarrassment of being a middle-aged woman with nowhere else to go. It was the uncertainty of what lay ahead. Taking a deep breath, I stepped out, grabbed my suitcase, and walked toward the door I had once knocked on to visit my boy, now a man of 22. Ethan opened the door before I could knock. He must have seen me from the window. His smile faltered for a brief second when he caught sight of my face. "Mom," he said, his tone filled with concern. I managed a small smile. "Is there room for one more?" Without a word, he took my suitcase and pulled me into a hug. I had always prided myself on being strong, but the warmth of his embrace shattered the walls I had tried to build. Tears spilled down my cheeks as I clung to him, my anchor in a storm that had left me adrift. Inside, Ethan fussed over me like a mother hen. "Sit down. Have you eaten?" "I'll make something," he said, bustling around the small kitchen. "I'm fine, sweetheart," I murmured, wiping my tears. "I just need some time to think." Over the next few days, Ethan proved to be a rock I didn't know I needed. He worked during the day but always came home with takeout or groceries, ensuring I didn't retreat into the despair that threatened to consume me. He cracked jokes to make me laugh and played my favorite music to lighten the mood. It was the little things that reminded me of the boy he had once been and the man he was becoming. When my ex-husband, I corrected myself, started calling and texting, begging for forgiveness, Ethan didn't hold back his opinion. "You're not going back to him, Mom," he said firmly one evening, his eyes burning with conviction. "He doesn't deserve you." I nodded, though part of me still struggled with the finality of it all. "It's not that simple," I whispered. "We've been together for so long. It's like losing a part of myself." Ethan leaned forward, his expression softening. "I know it's hard, but you don't need him to define who you are. You're strong, Mom. Stronger than you think." His words stayed with me, echoing in my mind during the quiet moments when doubt crept in. Slowly, I began to find my footing. Ethan encouraged me to take small steps, signing up for a painting class I had always talked about, reconnecting with friends, and even decorating his spare room to make it feel more like home. One night, as we sat on the couch watching a movie, I glanced at Ethan. The flickering light from the screen illuminated his face, a mixture of concentration and peace. I felt an overwhelming surge of gratitude for this young man who had dropped everything to support me. "Ethan," I said softly, breaking the comfortable silence. He turned to me, his eyebrows raised. "Thank you for everything." He smiled, a warmth that reached his eyes. "You don't have to thank me, Mom. I'm just glad you're here." The months passed, and what had once felt like a broken life began to resemble something whole. Ethan and I shared meals, stories, and laughter that filled the apartment with a sense of home I hadn't realized I had been missing. In some ways it felt like a second chance, not just at life but at being a mother and a person who mattered. Ethan gave me the strength to believe in myself again, to embrace the uncertainty of the future. And for that I would always be grateful. As I tucked myself into bed one night, I reflected on the road that had led me here. It wasn't the one I had imagined when I first got married, but perhaps it was the one I was meant to take. Life had a way of surprising us, and sometimes, those surprises came with a love and support we didn't know we needed. I woke up to the sound of Ethan bustling around the kitchen, the scent of freshly brewed coffee wafting through the air. The apartment, which had once felt like a refuge from my broken life, now felt like home. Ethan had a way of filling the space with his energy and warmth, and I couldn't imagine starting my days without him. "Morning, Mom," he said, his voice light and cheerful. He was dressed in a casual t-shirt and jeans, a faint smile playing on his lips as he leaned against the counter with his mug in hand. Morning, I replied, rubbing the sleep from my eyes. You're up early. He grinned, his boyish charm on full display. Big plans today. Big plans. I arched an eyebrow, curious. Pack a suitcase, he said, his tone mischievous. Summer clothes. We're leaving tomorrow. I blinked, unsure if I had heard him correctly. Where are we going? You'll see, he replied, his grin widening. Before I could press him further, he pulled out a beautifully wrapped box from behind his back and handed it to me. What's this? I asked, my fingers hesitating over the ribbon. Open it, he urged, his eyes gleaming with excitement. Inside the box lay a swimsuit, a stunning milk-colored piece with delicate details that made it feel luxurious. It was tasteful yet beautiful, something I wouldn't have picked for myself but instantly loved. Ethan, my voice faltered, overcome by the gesture. He shrugged, trying to play it cool, but I could see the pride in his eyes. You deserve to feel amazing, Mom. And trust me, this vacation is going to be unforgettable. My joy knew no bounds. I hugged him tightly, the box still clutched in my hands. You didn't have to do all this, I whispered, my voice thick with emotion. I wanted to, he said simply, his arms wrapping around me in a reassuring embrace. Now go pack. No arguing. The next morning, Ethan refused to tell me our destination. As we boarded the plane, he handed me a blindfold with a smirk. No peeking until we land. I laughed, shaking my head at his theatrics, but I indulged him. Hours later, as I removed the blindfold, I was greeted by a sight so breathtaking it almost didn't feel real. Crystal clear turquoise water stretched as far as the eye could see, white sand sparkling under the sun. The Maldives, he announced, his grin as bright as the sun above us. I was speechless. The resort he had chosen was like a dream, a private bungalow perched over the water, complete with a balcony that offered an uninterrupted view of the ocean. The soft murmur of waves surrounded us, and the warm sea breeze was intoxicating. Ethan, I finally managed, my voice trembling with emotion. This is too much. Nothing is too much for you, he replied, his tone firm yet gentle. Over the next few days, we dove headfirst into the paradise he had planned. Mornings began with snorkeling in waters so clear that the vibrant coral reefs and colorful fish felt like a world within reach. I laughed until my sides hurt as I fumbled with my flippers, Ethan teasing me mercilessly yet always staying close to guide me. Afternoons were spent exploring the island or lounging on the pristine beaches, the sun warming our skin as we shared stories and laughter. Ethan's playful side shone, and I couldn't help but admire the man he had become, thoughtful, kind, and so full of life. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold, we sat on the beach together. I leaned back against him, the steady rhythm of his breathing grounding me in the moment. Thank you, I said softly, my eyes fixed on the horizon. For what? He asked, his voice equally quiet. For all of this. For thinking of me. For reminding me what it feels like to truly live. He didn't reply immediately, but his arm tightened around my shoulders. You've always been there for me, Mom. Now it's my turn to be there for you. That night, back in the bungalow, we sat on the balcony under a canopy of stars. The ocean stretched endlessly before us, the sound of waves lulling us into a comfortable silence. You know, Ethan began, breaking the quiet. I used to think vacations were just about getting away. But this feels like coming home. I turned to him, my heart swelling with a mix of love and gratitude. You make every place feel like home, I said, reaching for his hand. Our relationship had always been close, but in those days, it deepened in ways I hadn't thought possible. Ethan didn't just bring me to paradise. He reminded me of the beauty in life, the importance of connection, and the strength I had forgotten I possessed. As we lay under the stars, his presence beside me, I felt a peace I hadn't known in years. Ethan was more than just my son. He was my partner in rediscovering the joy of life, and for that I would be forever grateful. I woke up to the soft rustle of movement, the sun streaming through the thin curtains casting golden patterns across the room. A delicious aroma teased my senses before I opened my eyes. When I finally stirred, there was Ethan, standing at the foot of the bed with a tray in his hands. "Good morning, sleepyhead," he said with a grin, his voice warm and teasing. On the tray sat a plate of fresh fruit, toast, and a glass of orange juice. "Ethan, you didn't have to do this," I said, sitting up and tucking the blanket around me. "Of course I did," he replied, setting the tray on the bed before leaning down to plant a quick kiss on my forehead. "You deserve to be spoiled." The sweetness of his gesture left me momentarily speechless. He settled onto the edge of the bed, watching me as I picked at the fruit. "So," he said, his tone playful, "why aren't you wearing the swimsuit I gave you yet?" I paused mid-bite, glancing at him. "I don't know, Ethan. Well, it's beautiful, but it's just not something someone my age should be wearing." His expression changed in an instant, the teasing replaced by something serious. He leaned closer, his eyes locking with mine. "Mom," he began, his voice steady and firm, "you are the most beautiful woman in the world. Age has nothing to do with it. I gave you that because I knew you'd look amazing in it, and you deserve to feel amazing too." I laughed softly, touched by his sincerity. "You're too kind to me." "I'm just telling the truth," he replied, shrugging. "Now, no more excuses. You're wearing it today. End of discussion." The determination in his voice made it clear there was no point in arguing. I couldn't help but smile at his persistence. As the day unfolded, Ethan continued to shower me with compliments, each one more surprising than the last. "You're glowing today," he said as we walked along the beach. "That swimsuit was made for you," he added when I finally relented and wore it. His kind words and encouraging presence were like a balm to the insecurities I hadn't even realized I was carrying. His gentlemanly demeanor only made the day more special. He held my hand as we navigated the soft sand, offered to carry anything I needed, and even fetched me a drink when the sun got too warm. It wasn't just his words, it was the way he looked at me like I was the most important person in his world. In the afternoon, we found a quiet stretch of beach where the waves gently kissed the shore. Ethan, with a mischievous grin, proposed a contest to see who could build the best sandcastle. I laughed at his enthusiasm, knowing full well my castle-building skills were nothing to boast about. As the competition devolved into playful banter, Ethan suddenly smirked. "You know, I think you'd look better as part of the beach." Before I could react, he gently tackled me onto the sand, his laughter filling the air as he began to bury me. "Ethan," I squealed, laughing so hard I could barely protest. "Stay still," he teased, piling sand over me with exaggerated care. "This is art, Mom. You're going to be the most beautiful sand sculpture ever." By the time he was finished, I was laughing so hard my sides hurt. Okay, I surrender," I said, my voice breathless from the fun. He stood back, hands on his hips, and surveyed his work with mock seriousness. "Perfect," he declared. "You're officially part of the beach now." I managed to wriggle free, brushing the sand from my arms and legs. Ethan held out his hand to help me up, and as I took it, he pulled me into a warm hug. "You're the best, Mom," he said, his voice softer now. I hugged him back, resting my head against his shoulder. "I don't know what I'd do without you, Ethan." The warmth of his embrace lingered long after we returned to the water to rinse off the sand. The day seemed to stretch endlessly, filled with laughter, easy conversation, and moments of quiet connection. As the sun began to dip lower in the sky, painting the horizon with hues of orange and pink, we sat side by side on the beach, watching the waves roll in. Ethan wrapped an arm around my shoulders, pulling me close. "Today was perfect," I murmured, feeling a deep sense of contentment settle over me. "It's not over yet," he said, his voice full of promise. I tilted my head to look at him, his profile illuminated by the fading light. His expression was peaceful, yet there was an intensity in his eyes that took my breath away. "I hope you know how much you mean to me," he said quietly, his voice steady but laced with emotion. I placed a hand on his, squeezing gently. "And you mean the world to me, Ethan." More than I can ever say. That night, as we walked back to our bungalow under a blanket of stars, I couldn't help but marvel at how much joy and love one person could bring into my life. Ethan wasn't just my son. He was my light, my anchor, and my reminder that even after the hardest chapters of life, there was still beauty to be found. The stars shimmered above us as Ethan and I strolled back to the bungalow after our long, joyful day. The night air was warm and inviting, carrying the faint scent of salt and flowers. I couldn't help but feel a peace I hadn't known in years. But just as we stepped onto the wooden deck, Ethan stopped and turned to me. His expression serious yet soft. "Mom," he said, his voice steady, "promise me something." "What is it?" I asked, suddenly alert. "Promise me you'll never go back to him," he said, his eyes locking with mine. "You deserve so much better than that." I hesitated, the weight of his words sinking into me. "Ethan, it's not always that simple," I began, but he shook his head, cutting me off. "It is," he said firmly, stepping closer. "You've been through so much, Mom. You gave everything to someone who didn't appreciate you. You deserve someone who sees you for who you are, the most beautiful, strong, incredible woman I know." His words brought tears to my eyes. I tried to speak, but the lump in my throat made it impossible. Instead, I nodded, a small but heartfelt gesture of agreement. Ethan's smile softened, and he reached out to gently squeeze my hand. "Good," he said quietly. "Now come on. Let's do something unforgettable." "Unforgettable?" I asked, wiping away the tears. "Swimming in the ocean," he said, his grin returning. "Under the stars. You'll love it, I promise." I laughed softly, shaking my head at his spontaneity, but his excitement was infectious. Okay, I said, relenting. "Lead the way." The beach was deserted, the sand cool beneath our feet as we walked toward the water. The moon hung low and full, casting a silver glow over the waves that lapped gently at the shore. Ethan pulled off his shirt, revealing his strong, broad shoulders, and turned to look at me with a playful smile. "Well," he teased, gesturing toward the water. I hesitated for a moment before slipping off my sandals and walking toward him. The cool water swirled around my ankles, and soon we were waist-deep, the moonlight reflecting off the surface like 1,000 tiny diamonds. "It's beautiful," I murmured, the tranquility of the moment washing over me. "Not as beautiful as you," Ethan said softly, his voice carrying an honesty that made my heart ache in the best way. I turned to him, the moonlight highlighting the sharp lines of his face, and felt an overwhelming wave of emotion. There, under the stars and the endless sky, I could no longer keep my feelings hidden. "Ethan," I began, my voice trembling, "I need to tell you something." He stepped closer, his eyes searching mine with an intensity that took my breath away. "What is it?" I hesitated, the words heavy on my tongue. But his steady gaze gave me the courage to continue. "I don't know when it started, but I've never felt this close to anyone. You make me feel safe, seen, and cherished in ways I didn't think were possible." His expression softened and he reached out, his hand brushing against my arm. "I know," he said simply. "I feel it too." Before I could respond, he pulled me into a warm embrace. The world seemed to fall away as I rested my head against his chest, the steady rhythm of his heartbeat grounding me. We stayed like that for what felt like an eternity, wrapped in each other's warmth as the waves lapped gently around us. When we finally emerged from the water, Ethan draped a towel over my shoulders and led me back to the bungalow. He ordered wine, and soon we were seated on the balcony, wrapped in soft bathrobes, the night air cooling our damp skin. Ethan poured us each a glass and handed one to me, his eyes never leaving mine. "To new beginnings," he said, raising his glass. "To new beginnings," I echoed, clinking my glass against his. We talked late into the night, sharing stories, dreams, and truths that had long been buried. Ethan listened intently, his gaze unwavering as I spoke about my fears and hopes. "You're so much stronger than you realize," he said at one point, his voice filled with admiration. "And you're so much kinder than you give yourself credit for," I replied, my heart swelling with gratitude for the man sitting across from me. The night stretched on, the wine loosening our words and deepening our connection. Every glance he gave me felt charged, every smile holding a depth that spoke volumes. As the candles on the table flickered low, Ethan leaned back in his chair, his eyes soft but intense. "You know, Mom, I never realized how much I needed this time with you. It feels like everything finally makes sense." I reached across the table to take his hand, my heart full. "I feel the same way." The moon was beginning to dip below the horizon when we finally retired for the night, the warmth of the evening lingering in every fiber of my being. As I lay in bed, I couldn't stop the smile that spread across my face. Ethan had given me more than a vacation. He had given me a new sense of purpose, a reminder that life was still filled with love and beauty. And as the gentle sound of the waves lulled me to sleep, I knew that this was only the beginning of something extraordinary.